And during his Easter Sunday address, Pope Francis called on the world to end violence, to end poverty, and to end the pandemic. Pope Francis called upon the leaders of the wealthy nations to display the, quote, spirit of global responsibility by speeding up the vaccination distribution and share the, quote, essential tool to end the pandemic with poorer nations. The United States is now administering more than 3 million new vaccine shots daily. The CDC also reported a record 4.1 million new doses that were given out on Saturday. The agency says just over 104 million Americans, or 31% of the population, have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Nearly 60 million people, or 18% of the population, are fully vaccinated. The CDC says it's now safe for fully vaccinated people to travel. Americans traveling within the U.S. can now do so without needing a COVID test or quarantining. If you're leaving the country, you also don't need a test, unless the place you're visiting asks for it. And when you're coming back from an international trip, you should get a negative test before flying and get another test upon arrival. The guidance hasn't changed for Americans who aren't fully vaccinated, though, as they're urged to avoid traveling. These changes come after TSA reported the most passenger screening since the start of the pandemic on Friday. Charlie, so I went up, as I said, I went up to Boston with my boys, and we watched the Red Sox, a difficult week. And I will tell you, seriously, what was more difficult for me was driving through Boston. The city is abandoned. You know, we mock, and for good reason, many of the things that Ron DeSantis say. We've been very concerned about Florida. You look at a lot of the pictures, and there's just rank irresponsibility. He seems to be trying to, quote, own the libs with every statement he makes. At the same time, you go to the other extreme. And look at what Charlie Baker and the state of Massachusetts is doing. I'm telling you, it's like going back 10 months. Almost all the buildings were shut down. Almost all the restaurants were shut down. I know a lot of the schools are shut down. I mean, there is a happy medium between there. And with a mental health care crisis exploding the way it is right now, and every mental health provider I talk to says we are now at a tipping point. Charlie, I know you, like me, we're conservatives, but we've been urging caution through this pandemic. Yeah. I think the caution now goes to the other side. People need to start opening up. We've got 1 out of 3 Americans at least partially vaccinated. 4 million Americans got vaccinated on Saturday. Deaths and hospitalizations are plunging. It is time to open every school. It is time to start opening up cities like Boston. The mental health of Americans requires it with all of these vaccines already in the arms of Americans.
Well, you're right. We're in this race, though. We're in the race between the vaccination and the herd immunity, and then the recklessness of, some people in, the country who are not observing any of the limits whatsoever. But you're right. Look, this country it's pent up demand. It's like a wound spring that people are just ready to get back to their lives. And you mentioned getting back to school. Look, this has got to be the #1 priority. And this is not a good look from some of the teachers unions who are continuing to resist going back to school even after they've been vaccinated. Look, we got to get the kids back to school. We're not going to get back to normal until we do that. The science seems to make it very, very clear that you can reopen the schools without a significant health danger. So absolutely, we need to get back to school. Here in Wisconsin, we're much more open than you described in Boston. We're not yet at Florida levels. But, I guess my concern is that we're at the 3-yard line right now. Let's not spike the football at the 3-yard line. Let's take all of the precautions. But the clock is ticking. Look, I mean, by the end of this month, by the beginning of May, people are going to go back to their lives, whatever the rules are, whatever the guidelines are, whatever the shutdown rules are.
Yeah, the clock is ticking, but we're not on the 3-yard line as it pertains to schools. A month ago, Anthony Fauci and others were saying it's time to get kids back in school. I'm sorry if politicians are scared of teachers' unions. I really am. If you're really that weak that you're not going to do what's in the best interest of children after Anthony Fauci is telling you to open up the schools, I feel sorry for you. Because you need to do what's in the kids' best interest. And you know what? Again, let me be very clear. We're not at Easter of 2020 when Donald Trump was recklessly saying open the country. We're at Easter. We're past Easter of 2021 when 1 in 3 Americans have had at least one of their vaccinations. And we had 4 million vaccination shots given the other day. We have made great advances over the last year. We understand what causes COVID and what doesn't cause COVID. There is no reason why buildings across Boston and this country can't open up, at least partially open up, where N95 masks require 6-foot distancing, have proper ventilation. Enough is enough. Follow science. It's what we were saying when we were criticizing Donald Trump. That's what we're saying now. Follow the science. And if you follow the science, every school should be opened in America. Adrian, I know it's a balancing act. I know that a lot of people have looked at what's happened over the past year and looked at the recklessness of the former president, looked at the recklessness of certain Republican governors who are more interested in owning the libs than they are following science and medicine. At the same time, aren't we getting really close to the point where cities, towns, businesses, small businesses, restaurants should be allowed to open up across the country?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, you talk about that happy median, striking that balance. That's exactly what we're looking for. You have states like Florida, Arkansas, my home state, that have taken this, I think, to the farthest extreme by lifting the mask mandate, not helpful. You have states like Massachusetts, as you mentioned, that probably need to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of opening up businesses. But Joe, I want to mention something when you talk about what's in the best interest of kids and sending kids back to school. It's also in the best interest of parents. There's a lot of parents out there who simply cannot afford to stay home with their kids. That we don't have a federal paid leave policy. The Biden administration has made it clear that that's something that they are hoping will be passed in maybe one of the next upcoming stimulus bills. But it's something that's got to be focused on here because you just not every parent in this country has the luxury of staying home and taking care of their kids. So that's something that governors across the country have got to be focused on. And it's something that, we've got to take into consideration when it comes to the interest of the kids.
And, Rev, Adrian brings up a great point. I'm talking about the children. Obviously, again, I want to keep going back and underlining the mental health crisis, which has been very tough throughout the year. But again, talking to mental health providers, it's getting worse by the day. And we are reaching a critical moment right now where kids have to get back into school. But Adrian brings up a great point. There are a lot of parents that can't continue to be staying at home, staying away from their job, being distracted from their job. This has a disproportionate impact, especially on working class and middle class Americans who can't afford a nanny, can't afford a babysitter day in and day out.
Not only does it have a disproportionate impact on working class parents, it has a disproportionate impact on those youngsters that are in broadband desert areas that can't go to school online because it's not available to them. So when you compound the fact that we have large swaths of the community that I come from that have been victimized by broadband deserts, you compound that with the mental health issue and by parents and some of them single mothers that can't afford to stay home. It is time to go back to school, particularly when vaccinations have been so widespread now. It is even more necessary for those that have been disproportionately impacted.
And Eddie Glaude, you also look at the financial crunch that working class and middle class Americans have been through. You also you look at the disproportionate impact that this pandemic has had not just economically, not just medically, but also economically on people of color. And when I'm driving past those buildings in Boston, one after another, after another, after another, shut down, you know, the people that run the building, the executives in that building, they're watching their money multiply in the stock market over the past year. This past year has been one of the best years for the top 1%. But it's when those every day, Charlie Baker allows those buildings to stay shut down. Every day, people can't go back to work. It's not the top 1% that are being damaged. For the most part, it's working class Americans, working class Bostonians, middle class Americans, middle class Bostonians, and not just in Boston, but across the country. The people who are feeling the disproportionate impact of us not opening this country back up when 1 out of 3 Americans have been vaccinated, when the majority of Americans, are moving toward immunity. We've got to get this country open back up for working class and middle class Americans, because you look again at the death rate, you look at the hospitalization rate, it's going down. Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.